Hello, everyone. Excited to welcome Jamie to this podcast and introduce you to him. You may wonder why we have the same last name. It's because we're married. We're married, and I was looking at this process and this series of podcasts I want to do on company culture and realized that right here is someone who has expertise in helping companies and leadership teams build culture using the strengths on the team. And I thought, hey, Jimmy, would you come and talk to me about building company culture? So here we are. So, Jamie, glad to have you here finally after 30 years of marriage, our first podcast together.
Yes, we've been negotiating this moment for quite some time now.
Exactly. So what I wanted to just going to dive in with you is this, with everything that has changed in the past few years with COVID and the Great Resignation and this whole movement with hybrid and remote and so on and so forth, really talk about how companies go about in terms of building culture, learning about their teams. And I know that one of the frameworks that you use is StrengthsFinders. So I wanted to kind of just talk to you a little bit about that and the importance of knowing what strengths people bring and what it is that they need on a particular team. So would you mind just sharing a little bit about your background and kind of how you've come to this point? And we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. My journey into this world of sort of understanding why, how, and what people need to do to work better together began about 11, 12 years ago when I went through the proverbial discover your why and then the how and what become easier. And what I appreciated about Clifton Strengths is that Clifton Strengths focuses on the how we do what we do. When we know our why, which is intrinsic and very personal, our what can become much more dynamic. And then many individuals can get lost in how they're doing what they're doing when they're not clear on that. And Clifton Strengths as you take the assessment, you look at your 34 complete talents and the top 5 become your strengths. Those are the ones to initially focus on. What I like doing when I'm working with companies is focusing on the talents of 6 through 10, because that's where we are learning that the true potential lies and the greatest potential to be unlocked are in the talents that are not necessarily our strengths.
So you mean the first 5 of those 10 is something that naturally occurs? It's the 6 through 10 that the potential and the opportunities lie within?
Exactly. If I'm looking through, for example, context is my number 2, I don't have to think about when I'm going to watch a documentary or what I'm going to learn from a specific book. I know I just pick it up or I just do it. To be more, my number 6 or 7 is maximizer, where I need to take good things and I want to make them great. I have to put a little bit more intentionality and a little bit more thought to it. It's not an automatic process.
Mm-hmm. So really a growth opportunity even for every individual.
Definitely. Our greatest growth for me lies within the 6 through 10.
Mm-hmm. Right. How would you say from a team dynamic standpoint, I know you've shared in the past that Gallup Strengths or Clifton Strengths is not a hiring tool, but really more of a development tool. Can you share a little bit more about that and how hiring managers and just managers as a whole can utilize tools like Clifton Strengths to be able to develop their core team, their people?
Yeah, these tools are really, they show how good a person may be on paper or as a result of algorithms and science that have been put out there. Where really the greatest growth happens is when they actually are doing the work. And when I know how I can do some things better than others, then I can team up with the right people that if not are better at certain areas and partner up with them. And for me, that's where team dynamics become more important than growing just one individual. It's really how do you grow the entire team and what are the individual contributions that each player can make to make that team greater. So I didn't really answer the question. Probably to be more specific, all of the assessments are good. They all offer insights. It's similar to a painter. A paintbrush is a paintbrush, but it's a different painting in the hand of Picasso than it is in Van Gogh. It's really how does the manager know how to use those tools to get the best, to extract the best out of people.
Okay. I understand that. Thank you for that analogy. That makes sense. That makes sense to me. How would you, just for an individual, I know that it was a very eye-opening exercise for me to just take my assessment and just recognize what my strengths were and maybe what are not so strong for me, and choose whether I want to work on that or not. But how would you suggest to different teams to be able to kind of work on this together and have this be a tool for constant communication, and kind of how do they operationalize it, basically, is where I want to go with it. Is it's one thing to take the assessment, but it can easily sit in a drawer and collect dust. It's another thing for it to become part of the everyday conversation of a team. What would you suggest there?
The best way is to use it as an opener for many meetings. There's many companies. There's thousands of companies that use Gallup tool, Clifton Strengths, to create a strengths-based culture. And so we can use opening exercises. I know when I was in a leadership role for several years ago, as we were going through COVID, our monthly meetings was, what 2 strengths are you counting on to get you through COVID? And it allowed for people to be authentic. It allowed for people to look at themselves and say, okay, these are the things that I can count on myself, because we don't exactly know what's going on in the world outside, and these are things I can count on within myself. And then when that is shared collectively, people start to connect. They say, oh, okay, I can go to this person for that. I can go to that person for this. And importantly, they can come to me for what they need. Some of the Clifton Strengths reports offer a report that's bring need. What's the value that I bring to the team, and what's the energy that I need to gain from the team? And when you have everybody doing this in sync, it can become a very powerful way of pushing teams up to that next level.
Yeah, I like who can I go to, because maybe I don't have that strength, but somebody else does. Who can I rely on to see this through, and vice versa. So just for clarity's sake, speaking of context, I know we're referring to Clifton Strengths, Gallup, StrengthsFinders. Would you mind just sharing with everyone that we are talking about the same tool, just the name has evolved over time?
Yes, it was StrengthsFinders, and then it became Clifton Strengths, and they have merged with Gallup. So it's Gallup is the big brand, and Clifton Strengths. So for now, it's called Clifton Strengths.
Okay.
And within Clifton Strengths, there are 34 talent themes, of which the top 5 become your strengths.
And then 6 through 10 are the opportunities for further development and growth.
Exactly. Those are, I believe they call them supporting themes. I can't quite remember. However, they do support the top 5. Okay.
And I think it's really interesting for the audience to just know that, we're talking about it in the context of work, but how impactful it is just in the context of everyday relationships and conversations, just with just Jamie and I. Jamie's number 2 strength is context. It's my number 32. So you could just imagine the conversations that we have around that. Or I know who to go to anytime I want details on things, because that is not me. Or I want history of things. I know who to go to for that. But that just makes a very interesting conversation between the two.
And in exchange, I know to come to you for ideas, because you have ideation quite high. And if I'm stuck on a certain area and can't break through, I will come to you and ask, hey, this is the challenge I'm facing. What thoughts do you have? You'll give me a list of ideas very quickly. And then I will take those and then put them into my way, my methodology of executing.
So at Artisan, we several years ago chose to really adopt StrengthsFinders as one of our frameworks and one of our tools that we're using here. So what we've done to operationalize it is that on our Slack channel, every single member has their strengths listed. Every single team meeting, we talk about what we bring to the table, what we need based on our strengths. It's something that when we're talking about reviews and just having one-on-ones, really looking at where those strengths need support, how those strengths are showing up, And it's just really become part of our, I think, just company culture and part of our conversation, which has really strengthened, no pun intended, but has really strengthened how we're communicating and how we're talking to one another.
So that's good. So if I could turn this on, what's an example of how you've done that beyond Slack? What's an example of maybe in a meeting or when you're facing a challenge where you said, let's look at our collective strengths?
Yeah, so the interesting piece is that we have some team members that are very high in communication, and we have some team members that communicate, but maybe not so, they're not necessarily outgoing, they're not necessarily the social butterflies, if you will, and making sure that both sides of the equation, the ones that have, woo, which is winning others over, have that as part of their strengths, but recognition that maybe not every single person on the team has that, but still creating space for everybody to have time to communicate and to verbalize what's going on and not dominating the conversation. So just that recognition and that self-awareness has been huge. Otherwise, our conversations could turn very one-sided. So that's been an important distinction, just to know that there's some amazing people with amazing things to say. They may just not be the first ones that will jump in with something, and to how to create the space for them to say something has been important to recognize. So when you're talking and working with leaders on these leadership teams and utilizing, whether it be StrengthsFinders or any other assessment that they're choosing to use on their teams and in their organizations, how do you go about advising them as to how to use that tool and how to kind of utilize it to bring clarity, communication, and conversations to the forefront?
I believe for leaders to get to know their teams better, the teams have to get to know the leader better and open up and show your strengths, show your struggles. Let everybody have a peek behind the curtain, see that, and then open it up. Usually most time the answers are already within the room. And if the leader is able to openly communicate that this is where we're going, here's why we're doing this, now let's get to the how part, and this is where we're going to need each of you to step up. Let's talk about the value that you bring. Let's talk about your strengths. Let's talk about your struggles. And if we are lacking certain resources or certain diversity of thought, then let's go out there and get those players, or look within and develop people that are within and bring them up to that next level. So it's really important for the strengths to be throughout the entire company and not remain the exclusive domain of the leadership team only.
So do you mean that as a leader, if they're looking at all the different strengths of their team members and are seeing particular gaps in particular strengths, but they can recognize that in their strengths 6 to 10, they have an opportunity to really develop that strength up, or go out and add to their team with people who may have different skill sets?
Exactly. Look within first. If it's there, create opportunities for those strengths to evolve, for those talents to evolve into strengths. If it simply doesn't exist on the team, then let's look who can complement this team. Because if we have a team that is too similar in thinking, then the blind spots become pronounced, because we're all susceptible to exactly the same blind spot if we don't have that broader base of diverse thinking.
Yeah, I'd imagine that if a company culture is really about developing their existing talents and helping their existing employees rise to the next level, whether it be within the company or just personally grow, having a tool to really be able to calibrate that and just help promote that is going to be really important, and recognize that.
Yes, exactly.
In terms of if people are interested in just kind of finding it out for themselves, maybe it's not something that their company offers, can they just go to the Clifton Strengths site and take the assessment for themselves?
Absolutely. The assessment requires about 40 minutes. of uninterrupted time. And there's two products that they offer. One is just the top 5 at a certain price, and then there's the full 34 at a higher price. And the reports are really very, very robust. They give a lot of good personal insight. And what better investment of one's time than to start to study oneself?
Gosh, I mean, I know I wish I had had this tool many, many years ago. I think there's some things that I was harsh on myself for, but realized later on that actually, no, that was a strength. I just didn't recognize it at the time. So, because I know that this particular tool is also available for younger adults or kids.
They do have one that's designed specifically for children from the age of, I'm going to say 8 to about 13. And it's called Strengths Explorer. And that's really to allow families to have a similar conversation that have younger children. And I believe it gives 10, and within the 10, it gives you top 3 in a language that's easier to understand and easier for parents and children to communicate.
And I think that's the whole goal, right? And I know that's something that you've really focused on, is to bring clarity and open communication to teams and to groups.
And one thing I've learned from the coaching that I've done, and in particular from Judith Glaser in conversational intelligence, is that the quality of our relationships are based on the quality of our conversations. And the quality of our relationships determine the quality of our culture. And everything happens through conversation. And if Clifton Strengths can be a tool that stimulates a sort of a level 3 conversation, then what better tool to be using on an ongoing basis in terms of both personal and team development.
Okay. So what's a level 3 conversation?
Level 3 conversations. Well, actually, before I start that, let's go to level 1. Level 1 is really transactional. It's when you tell and ask, you're just going back and forth. And level 2 is positional, when you're advocating. I'm right, you may not be right, I'm right, you may not be right. And you're trying to prove that you know and the other person doesn't. Level 3 is transformational. It's where the conversation builds on each person's contribution to that conversation. And from there, in essence, you're co-creating, and it's releasing different kinds of chemicals in the brain where you create a safe space in order to build something. That's where the greatest creativity happens, because you're building something greater than when you started the conversation.
Yeah, I could see how that's so powerful, especially, obviously, we work with creatives, and we work with people who are in a space of co-creating all the time. And or a creative working with their team members and maybe on the account side or the project side, but how do we, or even creatives who may look at things differently. Art is very subjective, so to have this ability and really this understanding that I'm trying to have transformational conversations and not necessarily positional. Maybe sometimes it is transactional, but really elevate to that level. And knowing who our teammates are, kind of knowing what their strengths are, really, I would imagine, really helps to be able to have those types of deeper transformational conversations.
Absolutely. And we do need transactional and positional conversations. It's when we get stuck in that rut and don't elevate ourselves to the next one, that's the opportunity that's being missed. And being able to recognize a pattern and knowing, oh, so-and-so is this way because they have such high belief as one of theirs. So how do I get them to see that there's other perspectives that may be as equally as valid as the ones that they are so tightly holding on to?
Amazing. Thank you for that. What would you leave our audience with if there was one thing after this call that they chose to implement on their team or in their company to help elevate culture and understanding and communication? What would you suggest that they do?
I would put it in a simple phrase for me is know your strengths, know yourself. And then when you know yourself, be curious about the strengths of your team and your teammates, and bring that culture in so they are equally curious about you. And so we're constantly uncovering these amazing talents that we all possess yet we don't always have the opportunity to express them. And once we're able to express them and see them in action, it does tend to elevate the entire team.
Amazing. Well, thank you for, after 30 years, taking time to sit here with me and have this conversation about StrengthsFinders and culture building. And where can people find you?
The easiest way is jdouraghy.com. I'm also on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jamie.
Thanks. And I guess we got to go make dinner now, right?
Yes, it is that time.